Hey guys, what's up? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/eggs show. That's EGGSSHOW. Audible has more than 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or just about any device you can imagine. As Eggs listeners, you can download a free audiobook today by visiting audibletrial.com/eggs show.
Hey guys, Mark Wahlberg here. Look, every morning I'm up at 4 a.m., I'm working out, I'm getting my biceps big, but one of the things I have to do is I gotta get my business mind big. The only way to do that is protein, and that's the Eggs Podcast. You get the eggs whites, you get the egg yolks, you get all of the parts of business, and you put them together in a big protein shake, you drink it up, you get to be like Big Marky Mark here. So do some push-ups, do some squat thrusts, do some things like that, be up with me every morning, 4 a.m., working out and listening to the Eggs Podcast, all right? Say hi to your mother for me.
Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right under Jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day.
Everybody, welcome to another episode of Eggs. Today's guest is Tim Bornholdt. Tim is an entrepreneur, software developer, videographer, and the founder of the Jed Mahonis Group. At Jed Mahonis, he specializes in helping businesses strategize, design, develop, and deploy custom iOS and Android mobile application systems that bring their products and services right to their customers' front door. Past applications include the Great Clips app, which I love and use with frequency, which allows the salon customers to check into the salon early, walk in, sit down, and basically get, jump the line. Also, Quickly, a platform that allows dental offices find and hire qualified dentists, hygienists, assistants, etc. All that and so much more. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. Join me in welcoming our guest, Tim Bornholdt.
Hey Tim, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, not a problem.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, we sound all cheerful and happy, but everybody should know that we've been just like beating the desk with our computer right now. And for anybody who will hear this in a week or two or a couple weeks when it finally airs, who did not see the live stream that we promoted because it did not happen, we've basically been struggling with some technical difficulties. I choose to blame Minnesota, but I don't know.
It's easy to do. It's easy to blame the software guy. All of your bugs are always it's the developer's fault. So.
That's right. So anyway, well, cool, Tim. Well, let's just get right into it. Unfortunately, because of the delays, we're going to be a little bit tight on time, so we'll try and be succinct with you. Let's talk a little bit about who you are, where you came from, what you do, and let's just get a little background information.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been doing software development my whole life. I made my first website when I was in first grade. My dad worked for Seagate. He just retired a couple of weeks ago, but he worked for Seagate who does disk drive manufacturing. So computers have been in my blood my whole life. And I actually got super burnt out on doing development by the time I got to college. So
well, when you start in first grade, that's quite a long time.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So that's why, I got to college and I was going for computer engineering, ended up just not liking it at all and switched to journalism instead because I wanted to do TV production with my life. ended up doing an internship at the CBS station here in Minneapolis, and got all set to do a job doing commercial television production. And my best friend from high school stopped me and was like, "Hey, just got a degree in business from college, and this app thing isn't going anywhere. You know how to do it. I can sell them. Let's just jump into business and do it." And as any entrepreneur knows, the first answer to that question is always, "Well, what could be hard about starting your own business? Let's do it."
Right.
So we jumped right in and have been doing it ever since. Been in business for 6 years, building iOS and Android apps for anybody who needs them.
So that was 2012,
Yep.
roughly? Okay. How did you go about getting like your first client? Like starting a business and going from nothing to here we are, getting that first client is always rough.
Oh yeah. It's brutal, especially when you go into it without any idea of what you're doing. I think we actually started doing this in 2011, but we spent about a year sitting on our couches in the basement playing Super Smash Brothers and not really
Right.
doing any actual work. And then you learn real quickly that no one's going to be just pounding down your door to give you work. You kind of have to go out and chase it down yourself. So, we put up, that's why I always say we started in 2012 is because that's when we actually first started marketing ourselves. We put up a website, just asked around for people who knew, and our first, real client just happened to find our website through a Google search and struck up a conversation and ended up selling it. I have no idea how. It just kind of happened, and we've been, rolling ever since.
Can I ask where Jed Mahonis comes from? Is that your partner's name?
No. I said that my best friend from high school, we did a television announcements class together, and we both had pen names. We had to have fake anchor names. This was the era of Anchorman had just come out. So we needed to have our own fake names. So he was Scott Mahonis and I was Jed Harrison. And when we started the business, we were like, let's just take, we didn't want to be something weird like Cutco or like Net Helper. We're really bad at names. So we thought, let's just take the two weirdest parts of our fake names and put them together and call it a business.
That's pretty
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, no, that really is great. So when you guys did get together and you found your first client, how did you tackle sort of that whole thing? I mean, you guys had been doing this stuff in school and you had learned how to do all these things, but now it's go time and you actually have to do this for a customer. Can you talk a little bit about what it took to sort of get up and running, process you developed, anything like that helped you through it?
Yeah. It's funny, like we didn't really, and don't tell any of our other clients this, but it was like the whole time going through it was just a constant trip and fall over our own feet. And, we first started out with the first app that we built was for ourselves, because we were like, no one's going to buy an app from us if we've never made an app for ourselves. So that was our first step was we built an app called the Random Celebrity Generator, which just was very basic, just push a button and it just spits out a random celebrity. You'd think that would take, now it would probably take us an hour to make that app. And it took us like 2 or 3 months to sit and figure out how do you actually write the code? How do you get the ideas down? How do you gather all the content? And then how do you actually publish it on the store and promote it? And it was just through that one app, we learned so much about app development. And then we applied that to another app we built for ourselves that it sends notifications when the American flag needs to be set to half staff. And through that, we learned all about push notifications and how does a backend work and all that stuff that, again, every app needs, but no one was going to take us seriously if we didn't do it for ourselves. So really the first year of our business was really like, let's figure out how to do this for ourselves. And then we learned, going into the client space, it took a long time to figure out how do you get an app from an idea in someone's head all the way through and into the app store and people using it. And it really is a lot of trial and error and took a lot of time to figure out that, you first, before you write any code, you got to sit down with your client and ask them, what are you building? How can we help you build this? What actually do people need? And a lot of that strategy is now what a lot of my job is making sure people aren't wasting their time and money on apps. I don't know if that actually answered your initial question or not. I kind of rambled for a while.
I think that's pretty helpful.
So one thing that I kind of dabble a little bit with websites and stuff like that. And one thing that I notice that happens when you're working with a client is it starts out with this simple site and then it gets bloated very quickly. You'll start a project and like, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? And then all of a sudden, all these little side things kind of.
Yeah, you're talking about the dreaded scope creep.
That's exactly what it is. Is there a way in the initial conversation that you sit down and have with the client? Is there a way to kind of curb that from happening in like an app type environment?
Honestly, no. There's really no way to prevent scope creep from happening because, I used to think scope creep was a negative thing too. But really, if you're trying to start your own business, scope creep can be the greatest thing in the world because people, as long as you structure your contracts and everything right, things are going to change. Like apps and websites are living things. So really, how we kind of curtail that in the beginning is we use an approach that's really common in the dev space called Agile. And everyone has their own weird way of doing it. But there's really this concept of minimum viable product or MVP. And that's really what we try to do is figure out what is the smallest app with the smallest set of features that we can push out to your users that they'll get value out of. And really it's trying to stay steadfast to that idea of you don't really know what your users want until you put something in their hands and have them actually test it. So instead of like, that's where a lot of scope creep comes from is, oh man, it'd be really cool if the app did this, or it'd be cool if that website had these 3 other features on it. But going down that path, you're just wasting a lot of time and energy. So really what we do is put those on a separate list and come back with change orders down the road and get those features in. But really just sticking true to that minimum viable product and getting something out the doors is crucial.
So more than that, do you mind expanding a little bit more on Agile? So I think a lot of people, and I mean, I don't know if you feel comfortable getting into Agile. I know it's kind of a thing. And I know a lot of people sort of handle it in their own ways. But the reason I ask is for that reason. I work in a marketing agency. I run a marketing and advertising agency. We work a lot with a lot of developers and groups that work on applications or websites or whatever. And Agile is something they use a lot. But I hear everybody throw it around, but I kind of don't really know what it means. Now, is Agile the setup with all the like sticky notes and the scrums and all that kind of stuff? Like, can you give maybe like a top level view of what Agile is without, you don't need to get super deep on it, but just sort of explain what Agile is versus maybe a different process?
Yeah. So, again, like the Agile approach is something that everyone's kind of taken the core concepts of it and just applied it to their own thing. So, if there's a true definition of Agile or not, I don't really know. But yeah, you're right with the whole idea of like sticky notes and scrums and all that fun stuff. That's pretty much what Agile comes down to is there is before, let me give a little bit of prehistory. So before Agile, what most developers did was an approach called waterfall, which is where at the beginning, like you said, you sit down and you write out, here's everything the app needs to do. It's a super comprehensive document that covers every single little feature that you want this app to do. Well, as you noted, like scope creep inevitably comes in because if you have a project that takes 6 months, something is definitely going to change in that 6 months. So it was just a hassle for a lot of developers to try to deal with all of that. So the Agile method is let's do a lot of quick, short bursts of development and make it into smaller weeks. So like how much work can we fit into 2 weeks instead of thinking 6 months, condense it down a little bit and give, when you get really into it, you assign points to different tasks and you figure out like, how many hours is a feature actually going to take. But the long and short of it is Agile is just a way for you to think smaller and in smaller chunks when you're dealing with a project that's going to take 6 months to a year to finish.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, but basically the concept is you break it into smaller bite-sized chunks and just attack a little bit at a time. And then this allows you to be more agile as changes or things pop in. You can add them to sprints or whatever as you're going. So okay.
Exactly.
I think that's a good little primer on Agile. For a lot of people, especially if you're on the periphery of development, you hear about it a lot. And at my previous agency, we were working with a digital team or development team that had sort of an Agile setup, and they had, Scrum Master and all this kind of stuff going on. And they tried to involve our creative staff. So my background is in creative and design. And so they were trying to involve us in all their meetings, but I felt like we never got a good grip on what you were trying to get from us, Yeah. So I mean, maybe that was the way they were executing. But anyway, that's very helpful. Thanks.
Of course.
So you know nothing about us, but I've been working on this little project for about 3 years, and I built it in React, and it's a website based kind of just. It's a big project. But the question I want to ask is like, working with like iOS and Android, and a web friendly version of the same product. Is there a simple solution for getting it on all three platforms, or is it just you have to custom build it for each one?
Well, like every answer any developer is going to give you, it depends.
Right.
It depends on what your goals are, what you want to do long term. There are solutions out there that we would call like write once, run everywhere, and that would be things like React or Angular is like another popular front end framework that kind of helps you standardize things across a lot of different platforms. If your goal is to get something out the door quickly and start getting users using it, those types of tools work really well. The problem is that there's been this pipe dream for years. I mean, since I've been in web development, I've seen hundreds of frameworks come and go, and I've seen like Java, for example. The language itself was supposed to be this kind of panacea where it's like, yep, everyone just write everything in Java, and that'll solve everyone's problems. It'll work on Windows, it'll work on Mac, it'll work on Linux, whatever. It's never panned out because every platform is different and every use case is different. So if you're talking about building like an iOS and an Android app, right there, like I can see an Apple Watch on screen there, so I'm assuming that's one Apple user. But if you guys are both,
don't judge me. It's a really old one though. You could never run an app on this thing.
Yeah. Oh God, no. The differences between Android and iOS are so vast that they're pretty similar, but there's enough little small nuances that we found building it custom and specific to each platform is really going to give your user the best user experience long term. So but it also comes at it's more expensive and to maintain and to build and all of that. So again, it really comes down to what your goals are with how you want your app to look.
Interesting. Yeah, that just seems. You think that there'd be like I'm just going to take a frame and just pipe the website through it and call it an app. You know what I mean?
Well, I think there's a version of that, right? The mobile sites and the mobile apps and stuff where they're not really an app per se. It's just an HTML5 document, more or less, that's being loaded in. But it's being styled in a way that looks like an app. Like that's, I guess, a way to cheat a little bit, but it's not a true app.
Huh.
So. Right. And users can tell. I mean, if part of your brand is high quality software, they can tell if it's just if they can even put words to it, but they can feel that it's just not quite right. It's not quite a native experience. So that's where it comes down to native apps just feel a little bit better.
Huh.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And so I have somewhat limited experience in the app world, but we did do. We were part of an event called Startup Weekend. God, it's been maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. It was when Anna was here.
Yeah.
So it's forever ago. But anyway, we participated in this thing called Startup Weekend in Provo, Utah. And it's basically they give you 54 hours to launch a product. And, everybody contributes ideas or whatever. But our idea that won, and the group that our team, or the project our team was working on, was this app called Nom Nom Finder. And basically it was an app for tracking food trucks. And so, and then we were working with the food trucks, and they would report to the app and all this stuff. And so we came up with this thing, and much to your Agile thing, the woman who was our quote unquote CEO is like an Agile superstar. And so we operated on a very Agile team, and we had 2 iOS developers and 1 guy that was a Android developer, like in learning. And as we were going through this process and building this thing out, trying to get to this MVP, just to your point about all the differences and how difficult it is to maintain and all that stuff. Like ultimately, we got a draft of our Android app, but it was like 8 light years behind our iOS app. Yeah. And then when we finally pushed and went live, because we actually kept this thing going for a couple of years after the event. I mean, just the time to maintain the apps and keep pushing new updates and stuff like that when you're doing it times 2. And you require, 2 extra people because you have to have your Android, developer or your Apple developer and all this stuff. It became overwhelming, and ultimately we just ended up letting it go. And, and so, I mean, yeah, to your point about the goals and everything like that, I mean, our goal was, of course, to have both apps, but our pocketbook did not allow for that. And so, and everybody was, of course, willing at first to do it for free. So we got a long way for free, but real life creeps in. People have jobs and lives and kids and stuff, and it's hard to keep it going.
Totally.
But anyway, having that little bit of a glimpse into sort of an app development world, I mean, it's incredibly complex. And so I think it is clear, very important from the beginning. You said in the waterfall methodology, you would sit down and sort of develop this long form document. But I do think knowing your strategy before you go in can save you a lot of costly mistakes down the road. Because if you think you can run both and then you find out midstream you can't or whatever, like it happened in our situation, if you were actually paying for it and you were hiring developers to do this stuff, it could be very costly if you didn't really know what you wanted.
Totally. And it's really easy up front to say, oh yeah, it's just, we can just add in this little feature, or we can just, let's just put a little social component to our app. And it's like every little feature that you make at this point, at the early stages, compounds way further down the road when you have to deal with, okay, we have a social component, but changed the way their API works, or there's a new social network that we need to incorporate in. And just every decision that you make, even having iOS and Android, maybe you don't need both. And that can save you so much like cost and time down the road if you develop for one versus the other. That might not be the right case for you, but all those decisions you need to weigh in when you're at the early stages of figuring out what you want your app to do.
Yeah. No, I think that's really key because, and I will ask you sort of a trick question. I know everybody's going to want to ask this and everybody's going to want the answer. I work in advertising. I get asked to quote and bid things all the time, so don't worry, we won't hold you to it. But what does it cost to build an app? Like, I mean, and I know that the real answer is it could be $3,000 to $300,000. I mean, like it could be literally anything. But if somebody were to come to you or whatever, and they're just looking for a ballpark to get into, I don't know, just a basic app, what is the barrier to entry on something like that?
Well, I'll do kind of a long answer first, and then I'll give you the short answer. The long answer is when I really like to equate app development to like building a house. And it really comes down to like, if you're going to a realtor and you're trying to find a house, you're not going to go to the realtor and just say like, all right, go show me houses, which is like the equivalent of saying, how much is this app going to cost? The realtor is going to sit there and ask you like,
what does
okay,
a house
do you
cost?
What was that?
Oh, I just said, what does a house cost? If I go to my realtor and say, hey, what's a house cost?
Yeah, exactly. Like they're going to ask you priming questions like, what neighborhood do you want to live in? How many bedrooms do you need? What's your budget? Because they're not going to put you in a mansion on the lake when all you can afford is a shack in the woods. So that really, when it comes down, like you said, like between 3,000 and 300,000, like that is the range. It can really be anywhere in that depending on what features you want. But if you're, so to get to the short answer, if you're looking at something like an iOS and an Android app and some kind of backend with all the databases and everything to store all that data, I would budget for somewhere in the high 5 figures to get that whole system off the ground. So that, that would be design, strategy, everything around that. You're going to end up being right around that 100K mark to get all the way off the ground. And again, you can get down, more like 50K depending on what features you have and how robust it is. But I mean, that's if you're looking to do like a startup type app and you're coming to an agency like ours, you're probably looking between 50 and 100K to get a pretty common app with some internet connected parts to it off the ground.
Say I've got a wireframe and I've got like an idea for an awesome app, and I come to you guys. Do I need to have the funding first, or do you guys work with like angel investors and get funding for it?
Yeah. If you want us to take your wireframes and turn them into like a clickable prototype, we can do that. That's a service that we offer. But no, I talk to people at all stages, before they even have the idea written out on a napkin. I think people are willing to talk to you because it doesn't make sense to go down even the path of wireframing things out if you all of a sudden see like, well, your idea just baseline is going to cost you $300,000 to start. So we like talking to people at all stages, and then we talk about money when it gets to that point.
Well, and so to that point, or to take that a little bit further, like what kind of revenue and marketing models should somebody who wants to develop an app be, considering to even make it worth doing? I think for a lot of people, at least people who come to me with apps, many of them have been sort of novelty. It's like, I want one because everyone has one. It's the thing, you need an app. But they didn't necessarily, have a strategy behind it. It is an extension of an e-commerce store or an extension of whatever else they're doing. But can you make any recommendations for those types of models or sort of things to consider, that might make it, I guess, quote unquote, worth it, knowing that your goals could be variable. And so what's worth it to you might not be what's worth it to somebody else.
Right. I mean, there's two types of apps that we work on. There's either, customer facing, user facing apps. So that'd be something like Great Clips, where we're not building a tool for their corporate office. We're building it for their customers to check in. And if you're doing a customer type of app like that, either you need to be providing a service in real life that generates money somehow. So like, again, Great Clips, they're making money off haircuts. They make no money off the app itself. We built an app for a regional pizza chain here, and obviously they make money through the online ordering and the pizza delivery side of things. They're not directly making money through the app. So I would say if you have a real life service that you're offering to somebody that can be made easier through an app, then that's one possible source of revenue. The other big one that is common in this market would be anything subscription based. That would be, so like you mentioned the dental staffing app that we have. That one, people pay on a monthly basis to have access into that system. The offices do, and then the hygienists then get jobs booked through there. So that's one example of what you could do for revenue on that side. But then the other way that might make financial sense is if you're building it for the other side, which is for your own business. You might find that you can take some processes that you have for your business that takes so long to do from your back end, and then automate those somehow through an app. So you're not necessarily, again, making money directly off the app, but you're making it by saving time by having people use your app and your employees use the app as opposed to having to fill out paperwork by hand or whatever it is. So really subscription-based revenue models, or having it provide value with some kind of real-world service. The one thing I would recommend steering clear of is saying advertising, because anytime someone comes to me and says, "Oh, we'll just throw in a couple of ads into our app and that's what's going to make us millions." I mean, you're in the ad space. Like, how much money do you think ads bring in click-through rates on mobile apps?
Yeah, not a lot. Well, and I think actually a lot of times, especially if you have a branded app or something and, you're this is our app and we allowed ads inside it. I think you actually do more damage to the brand and to the relationship you have with your customers and things like that when they're being blasted with these pop-ups. The example that I've been using recently, just because it drives me bonkers, is there's this game called Bowmaster on iOS devices or whatever, and
I see what you're doing all day.
Yeah, right. Yeah. This is what I do when I should be prepping for the show. So there's so this Bowmaster app. Basically you just shoot your little arrows back and forth and try and kill each other or whatever. Well, like I got onto that app like pretty early, and it's just this dopey little game or whatever. But it was really fun, and you could play, and the more you play, the more coins you earn, the more guys you can buy, that kind of thing, right? And then monetization stepped in. And it's, one little thing. And then it's, if you buy a diamond, you get so many coins, and then blah, 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 blah. And now at this point, the game is so inundated with different ways to extort money, for every little guy. And it's a bigger problem for me now, not so much because like I've completely abandoned ship on this game. Like I don't play a lot of phone games, but my boys, I have a 7 and now 12-year-old, and they both love this game, especially the 7-year-old. And every minute it's, hey, I want a new guy. And when I played the game, you could earn that guy, but now you can't. Now you have to buy that guy, and everything is that way. And so for me, they've completely disenfranchised me on their app, their whole ecosystem, and everything, because they got greedy, or it looks greedy, And it's not necessarily ads, but it's extorting money in another way. And it's just way. They make the game basically, you can play a very core version of the game, but outside of that, it's pretty unplayable without without buying all the add-ons.
Oh yeah, it's the old adage that if you're not spending money, then you're the product, and that's exactly what all these ad based things do. That's how Facebook makes money, is they sell all your data to make money off of that, and that's how a lot of these games make money, is they're tracking your behavior throughout apps, and they're doing a lot of creepy things behind the background that does damage the goodwill you've built up with your brand. So there are, if you're running your own ad network, if you're actually going out and pounding the pavement and getting sponsors for yourself in the app, that's one thing. But most people just think, well, we'll just throw in some, AdSense or some other network and go from there. And that can do more harm than good. And really you need to be doing like millions of users in your app a day to be able to see any sort of significant return on that ad revenue. So,
yeah. So on your one sheet that you sent to us, there's a suggested topics area, and one of them is the gig economy, and I've never actually heard that term before. That's kind of a new term for me. Can you break that down for me? What is the gig economy?
Yeah. So the gig economy is, most people are used to going and having a 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week. The gig economy is basically Uber, apps like
okay.
that, where you're just picking up jobs here and there. And that's how people are making money these days.
Yeah. The way that I sort of explain it too is, much like that, where people are, going to, like in the corporate world or in an ad world, for example, people are now hiring just the motion artist, motion graphics artist, just the copywriter, just the whatever for a one-off project versus employing, a team of people and hiring these one-offs. It's basically a nice way of saying freelance workers, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting development, the way that we work in this country, and I suspect it will continue to grow. So can we talk to a little bit about, I don't know, like apps, I guess, have been a big part of our life now for quite a while. We're starting to, maybe they're losing their luster a little bit, every now and then a cool one comes out or whatever. But like, how can a business turn a profit with their app now that the sort of the gold rush is over?
Well, it's interesting because I see stats all the time that show that people only use 9 apps in a day, and in a month they use maybe 20. And this is including things like your alarm clock and your email and text messaging and things like that. So, like, yeah, you're right. Like people don't use apps, and they have lost their luster. Like the appeal of the gold rush being that, you put an app on the app store and you're a millionaire. That's been long gone for a long time. And, I like to say that apps now, it's just another tool that you can use to help your business out. It's not a slam dunk that when you have an app that it's going to be worth it to you or make you a lot of money. You have to actually, there's a lot of business behind apps, and it makes sense in the right, deployed in the right context. I don't have a giant shovel in my backyard scooping things out, because that's not a tool I need, every day.
Right.
I can go rent that or use it when I need to. So apps are the exact same way. And if you want to turn a profit with your business, usually like the indicator for needing an app is if your customers are saying, why is this not an app? As soon as you get that, that's really when you can start to see, okay, yeah, maybe it's worth it for me to invest the money it takes to build an app. But until then, yeah, you can probably just get by just fine with a website. That they work just well, and they're a lot less expensive than doing a full native mobile app.
Yeah, well, and nowadays with technology too, I remember in the early days of mobile websites how janky they used to be and things like that. Now devices give you a pretty decent experience as long as they're sort of coded well. You can get a pretty nice website on a phone nowadays without the expense of a native app.
As long
Totally.
as it's set up to scale correctly.
Yeah, it's just a matter of having been built well in the first place. But if that's your intention, is to put it be not not a native app, but actually have just a nice mobile app, that's a pretty doable thing these days. Especially, as a basic consumer, if you use, any of these, Squarespace or any of these like sort of little builder websites, they're all sort of optimized for mobile anyway.
Absolutely.
So I have to go backwards, kind of to the beginning of this conversation. We sort of skipped over your youth real quick, but there's one little component of your youth that I want to get into, and that is this idea of building a Ralph Wiggum fan page. So I had some pretty insane websites too in the early days. I don't know how old you are, but like, yeah, I'm just old enough that I had part of my life with no internet and part of it with. And so as HTML was coming out and being developed, I started working on it pretty young. And so I started building stupid websites for stupid things all over. And, in the early days, I would use my websites for all kinds of things, but most of them were pretty janky and they didn't look very good. But, so let's talk about that thing. Obviously it was sort of, I guess, not at the dawn of the internet necessarily, but pretty early on.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I guess it was right around 2000 was when I was really and up through up through the end of high school, I suppose. So there was about 6 years that I was really running this site, and it started off like you said. I was the exact same way. Like my first website was called Tim's World, and it was basically like just a bunch of crappy pictures you find all over the internet with a bunch of scrolling marquees and blink tags and everything else that was awful about the internet back in the late 90s. But then, I would make websites for things I was into. So like Animorphs and like pro wrestling. And eventually it was like The Simpsons. I was really into The Simpsons, and I thought Ralph Wiggum was the funniest character ever. So I started, I just made a website that back in that day, and I guess it's still kind of true for like the Tumblr type of websites where it's like nobody's making that content. They're just ripping it off somebody else's website and dropping it on their own. And that was what I had started as. And then as time went on, I had like a whole comprehensive database, like every appearance Ralph Wiggum ever made on The Simpsons with episode numbers, timestamps. Oh, wow. I had like WAV files. This is pre MP3. Of all of his like sound bites. I had screenshots that I took. Like I saved up my money to buy a capture card, and I hooked up, like I'd sit and like pause the VCR, like recording off of syndication and then taking screen grabs and posting them on there. Like I did the whole thing. And yeah, like I would get like, back in that day, I would get like 300 people a day visiting that site, which was like, I thought pretty impressive for like a lame fan page. But yeah, it taught me a ton about app development. I learned, I was self-taught with all of my code there for web development rather. So I learned PHP and MySQL and everything from making that database. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun to have that experience of taking something you love and trying to make some website and something that other people might be interested in.
What do you think about sort of, because I know you also went to University of Minnesota, but how do you, what are your thoughts on sort of self-taught versus standard academics? Like, I mean, did you feel like you've learned as much in school as you learned on your own?
Honestly, I probably, of my like total knowledge around software development, I probably would say 5% of it came from a formal education, and 95% of it was just myself reading tutorials and reading books and everything, just trying to figure it out on my own.
Yeah, I don't know if there's just if it somehow gets buried deeper in the mind or what it is, because having sort of a similar experience to you, having built websites in the early days and stuff like that. I mean, I don't do development anymore, but like I've been able to coast on the things I learned back then, and that was well before I was in college and taking books, and I mean, so that knowledge was sort of fundamental and built, as it was developing. Well, and that stuff is, I mean, even now I can speak pretty intelligently with developers as I'm coaching them through the projects we're doing, and I really attribute that to doing it on my own, more than anything I picked up out of college.
Well, I think that when you spend 7 hours trying to figure out something simple and you finally figure it out and it clicks, you tend to remember that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that is half of my job is just banging my face against the keyboard until realize like, oh, right, works. That's what it is, and then you're good. So
that's awesome.
So another thing that you do that we haven't covered is you host a podcast. And I think you're like 17 or 18 episodes in. Constant Variables. And essentially it's on your site, it's a non-technical look at mobile app development, which is pretty cool. I listened to a little bit of the last episode with Trinity Wiles. Very well produced. How long have you been, I mean, like you did one before about running, and this one's a new one. What got you into the podcasting world?
I was on a I was on a car trip with some friends going out to Vegas, and they were talking about podcasts. And my, being on the web for as long as I have been, you hear about podcasts, and I just thought, like, who's going to listen to a 2-hour episode about people talking about Star Trek? Like, I just thought it was so dumb. And then they were talking about these cool podcasts, talking about things that I care about. So I got really sucked into just the world of podcasts. And now I'm sure you guys are probably in the same. I mean, I know you're a DJ, but so you probably listen to some music.
A little bit.
But yeah, I just got really into the idea of using podcasts to spread knowledge. So I jumped right into doing constant variables as just a marketing way for us to spread our knowledge, because I think a lot of people think app development is somebody dressing up like Gandalf the Wizard and waving a wand and you got an app. And it doesn't need to be mystical and fearful for people. So I wanted to make a podcast people could listen to where it just takes the complex parts of app development and makes it easy enough for anyone to understand what's going on behind the scenes.
That's
yeah,
cool.
no, that is cool. Can you speak to, what do you think? And, this varies too. And actually there's a lot of parallels here between running your podcast and developing an app. But, what do you think the long game is? Like, I mean, are you doing this as a way to promote your business? Are you trying to establish yourself as an expert? And the reason I ask is a little bit selfish. Mike and I have a presentation to give here in a couple of weeks on the importance of podcasting for business. And, it's one of those things that really difficult to attribute like ROI to. I mean, you can do stuff with, if people have, promo codes or whatever, you can track it a little bit, but largely it's difficult to really attribute any kind of ROI to a podcast, unless you're, an Adam Carolla or something, and this is how you actually generate money. But for most of us, I mean, like Mike and I included, we both have day jobs, and this is something we do on the side. And, but for us, it's been a tremendous networking opportunity. It's been a good way to establish ourselves as experts in the field, or talk with experts, or learn things that we wanted to learn. So for us, it's been very meaningful and valuable in those ways, even though it hasn't actually paid dividends just yet. But I know that Great Clips, with all the butt kissing about this app, I know they're hearing us, and they're gonna want to come around.
Yeah, you might know some people.
Yeah,
there.
greatclips.com, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, but I just wonder if you could talk about your experience in podcasting and sort of what your motivations are, or what you think would be the positive outcomes that you would hope to get out of doing a show.
Well, so with constant variables specifically, that was just a way for us to establish ourselves as subject matter experts. And in the space we're in, I mean, you heard the numbers of how expensive apps are. It's like, if I get one customer they heard the podcast, any episode at all, like the lifetime spend of our podcast would have been worth it.
Yeah.
Just getting one single customer. So, and going on, going around and doing other shows too, that's all of it is in service of, hopefully if anyone out there needs an app, that's really, like you said, that's what it's all about is building up your brand. That's what that show was. And I did that. You said the running show. That's another podcast that I still do. It's called See Tolly Run. And it's an Olympic runner who, at first it was a YouTube series, and we just, because of time constraints and everything, we switched it to an audio only podcast. And, that one's been really fun, but it's hard to, get the word out, and to, we don't really know what it's for, other than just to kind of give back to the running community and give interviews with people that are big in the running scene, and trying to interview celebrities that are runners as well, and give advice. So, I mean, it's tough to figure out. Like you said, it's really hard to justify things sometimes, and you kind of have to jump into it, not thinking I'm going to make a ton of money being a podcaster. I think it's more, you got to kind of go into it like you guys did, where you have a side hustle and you're doing this to help out in other areas, and you get kind of ancillary benefits, but I don't know if there's really a direct measurable ROI just by having a podcast.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a good way of saying that stuff. So another thing I wanted to talk to you about that's completely unrelated to anything real important is that you're a beer guy.
Oh yeah.
No, his wife is a beer girl, right? She works there.
She works over at a brewery. But let's talk a little craft beer. What's your thing?
So, my business partner and I, there's a small Chinese restaurant, kind of like Panda Express, around the Twin Cities called Lianchin. And we had a map printed out on the wall. We wanted to get to every single one in the state. I don't know why. It's like all the same food everywhere, but we just thought it'd be funny. So we were, we crossed off these locations off a list, and all of a sudden, like a year later, couple, why is there not an app for this? And then we thought about it and we're like, wait, we can build this app ourselves. So I built out this app. Like we built out a prototype in a day, and we both thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I took it back to my wife at home and I was like, look at what I did all day. And she looked at me and she's like, this is the dumbest app I've ever seen in my life. And she got really mad at me. And then she left the room, comes back in like an hour later, and she's like, we're trying to get to every brewery in Minnesota. Why don't you turn this into an app for tracking all the breweries in Minnesota instead? And I was like, God, of course, like just total like strike of inspiration right there. So, it was a labor of love. The app is, if you go to mncraft.beer, you can see it's a list. You can create an account and then track every brewery in the state that you've been to. And, that's been just, again, it's like to go through 160 breweries every month to make sure their hours are up to date and everything is kind of a pain, but it's opened some doors. It's made some connections. And we have a couple thousand people that use it pretty regularly. So it's just kind of cool to have that out there. And then it gives me an excuse to go to breweries and I have to take a picture for the app.
Well,
so
of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's good promotion for them. They ought to be giving you beer for free. I mean, I don't know what the rules are like in Minnesota. I mean, they couldn't do that here in Utah, but I'm sure out in Minnesota they're a little looser.
Does this have a tap handle on, like, if you click on the beer or the app, like you go to that brewery, can you see what taps they have available in their actual menu, or is that a little bit above it?
No, so we if you have an Untapped account, Untapped's like a social network for beer drinkers. If you have an Untapped account, you can sign in and then it will show you which beers you've had at that brewery and which beers you haven't yet. And then you can also check in to your beers through Untapped right through the app.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I'm going to download both those apps now.
That's right.
Yeah, Untapped is addicting. Be careful.
Oh, great. So
and beer isn't? I mean, come on.
I guess
True.
Mike's going to be tuning out. So, cool. Well, so let's talk a little bit about, I guess, as you found your way into business and you've been starting to develop your company, like, what are some struggles you've had to overcome along the way? Like, if you're talking to sort of other aspiring app developers or people who are trying to be in business, a lot of times I think people go into business either, like you did, or maybe because they have that first opportunity. But how have you managed to build sort of a successful company, something that keeps moving and keeps customers coming back?
Without wanting to just like throw it all away and go drive truck.
It's even earlier today. It's like I've been putting out fires all morning too. It's I think people get into entrepreneurship thinking it's going to be all glamour and glitz, and you're going to run a multi-million-dollar company, and it's a piece of cake. And I think we were kind of laughing about earlier. It's like how naive to just think it's going to be super straightforward and simple. It's not. You have to want it. You have to want it. The things that have helped us stay alive, picking great clients is one of them. I think one of the big things people try to right away is, and we were guilty of that too, is you just, anyone that knocks on your door, you like roll out the red carpet and you undercut yourself significantly and you do everything you can to get that one person, and then they end up being a total nightmare client and being way more trouble than it's worth. And then by the time you start to figure things out, you're kind of anchored down by these other past obligations you've made. So it's easy to say, a lot easier to say than to do, to pick good clients. But that's really one of the best things you can do as an entrepreneur. The other thing is, when we first started, we were just out of college, and it was we both kind of worked in corporate-esque environments, and it's like, all this bureaucracy and red tape. I'm never going to have any of that stuff. It's not going to work for our business. But then you get down the line, and you're like, man, I wish we had some standardized way of doing things. And last year we made a concerted effort on our business to let's get some processes down and let's repeat them and refine them and really own, how do you do the thing you do reliably and repeatably with results every time. And it's taken a year, and you can finally see the fruits of those labors coming in a year later. So, not being afraid to standardize your processes. Even if you have contractors, you can still standardize some processes amongst how your team communicates and works. And one last thing too, that's been really instrumental is, like I said, communication. Clients, they want their thing done, and they don't want to hear excuses and reasons why you may not have gotten it done when you said you would get it done. But if you come to them early and you say, hey, I screwed up, I need a little bit more time. This thing went wrong. Is that okay? 99 out of 100 times that we've done that with our clients, they've been cool with it. And the times where they're not, it's like, we work through it and you figure it out. But, I think that's where a lot of people falter too, is you get a bad client, or you get in a bad situation where everyone's kind of mad at each other and no one's talking. And then the projects just don't get done. So setting clear expectations around how you communicate with your clients and how they'll communicate with you is another key to how we've been able to stay afloat.
Huh. Actually, in our questionnaire, we asked, do you have any suggestions for others out there trying to get in the field? And you answered perfectly, in my opinion. Develop a love for pain. And it's like you go on and you say app development is 90% failure and 10% exhilarating success. And I can relate. The process I've been on just in my, I'm going to learn web development track has been maybe 97% failure, and it finally worked.
I might have been over optimistic when I said 90%
right?
Pain. It's probably more like 98% pain.
Yeah. It's when it finally, like when you finally figure out how to make that div hide and come back or whatever you're working on, it's like, oh my goodness, thank you. And it's exhilarating. And then I don't know, there's just something cool about it. So I just wanted to say your answer was spot on.
No, it is a huge rush. Like and that's where app development is not for everyone. Because if you can't handle failure and it's a lot of tedious work. But then as soon as it clicks, it's like it's still like to this day. I mean, we've shipped almost 100 apps to the App Store, and it's still like the time that you get to first upload an app to the store. It's still exhilarating to do that because how it's taken months to get this thing off the ground and out the door. So yeah,
that's so cool. I can't wait to ship my app to the App Store.
I can't wait to download it.
Right? Me too.
Yeah. So one last thing, sort of on the app front, and then I think we're going to have to get off. Let's. Can you just give us sort of, and we've sort of glazed over some of these things, so it'll be a little bit repetitive, but I want to put it kind of into one succinct soundbite as a nice little takeaway for people. But what are some rookie mistakes that people make when starting to build a mobile app? And maybe talk through the process of like some of the hurdles that, people come with, or like, how to determine if it's a good idea or a bad idea. Like, I mean, if there are some kind of pointers you can give when they start that with that little nugget or that little fire in their brain that says, hey, I might need an app.
The first thing that you got to do is make sure that you've got a revenue model behind it. Whether you're making money directly off the app or through a subscription or whatever, or whether it's providing value to your business or to your customers, and you're getting kind of just like podcasting, you're getting some intangible benefits off of it. That's really the key mistake that we see is people don't think through that business side of things. The other some other common mistakes that we see. I think people assume that you need to have everything done right away in your app, and that you need to hit the ground with a fully fleshed out app. And I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make. You can get something out the door that's small and succinct and gets your app in front of your user and helping them become a hero is what we like to say. Everyone downloads an app not because they want to use your app. They download your app because they want to get their job done. They couldn't care about your app. They just care about themselves and getting their work done or getting some enjoyment out of it. So whatever you can do to just get out of their way and give them what they need as quickly as possible and without throwing in a bunch of other features, that's another key mistake that we see is a lot of people not thinking about their user. So think about your user and make sure that you know how you're going to make money off of your app. Those are the two things that you can do to make sure you're setting yourself up for success in the App Store.
Cool. Well, I think that's super helpful. I did just also read here in the questionnaire that your favorite karaoke rap song is "Rap God" by Eminem. If I'd have had more time to prep for this thing, I would have loaded up a Rap God karaoke screen right now and had you try and bust through that. I'd like to see that one.
I just did it. I went to a wedding. My friend's a karaoke DJ, and I went to his wedding. He did it at a small theater in the Twin Cities, and so I got to go up on stage and do it in front of like 300 people, and that was I think my heart is still up in my throat from doing it. But
Can you actually stick with it, or at some point do you start going blah, 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 and hope nobody catches on?
Yeah, luckily the words weren't up on that one. But I can pretty much, if I'm in the shower and I'm singing along to the karaoke track, I can nail it every time. But as soon as you throw in the pressure of people listening to you and you're kind of on stage jumping around and stuff, it's like, if you ever watch Eminem doing that song live, it's like that dude's feet are planted and he is not like jumping in the air and doing anything because you run out of breath so fast.
Well, and you only have so much brain power. Like, I mean, I can't move limbs and do that. It's too much.
He's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, in fact, there's a song on his new album. I wish I could remember which song it is, but there's this dude, Joyner Lucas, that raps on the song, and he's got one of these sort of fast raps, kind of like a Eminem style thing, and it's like, dude, so cool. I love it. My brain can't process words fast enough for that. I'm a little too slow, but anyway, still pretty cool. So cool. Well, thanks so much, Tim, for your time. Sorry about all the technical drama at the beginning. You can find Tim online at jedmahonisgroup.com. That's Jed, Jed. Mahonis is Mahonis group.com. And you can find everything you want to do. If you want to build an app, he's the guy. And also, if you've got questions, concerns, like he said, Tim is cool to meet with people anywhere along the process. So if you're just thinking about an app, or if you've got one, go ahead and reach out. Let them know you heard about it here too. That would be good for us to know that somebody actually heard this thing. So anyway, without anything else, Tim, any parting shots? Anything you'd like to say before we get out of here?
No, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulties if they were coming from my side as well, and I'm sorry if anybody heard a screaming 2-year-old going up and down at all. That'd be my daughter. So.
Nope, she was great. Give her a high five. So cool. Thanks a bunch. All right, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care, guys.